Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Noz Urbina, and this is Omnichannel X's Omnichannel Podcast. Omnichannel X is brought to you by Urbina Consulting. Omnichannel X is our international learning portal where we host the thought leaders and case studies we think will be most helpful for content-rich organizations trying to build better relationships across all touchpoints. Now, enjoy the show. Excited to have Regina Lynn Preciado with me today to talk about omnichannel, structured content, the role of all of that in the life sciences world today, the state of pharma and life sciences and their adoption of things like structure, this Lego-like modular content. We talked about that, what it is and how to get started with it, and also some of the benefits like reuse, personalization, faster time to market with your content, consistency, even staff morale and job satisfaction. So Regina is a senior director of content strategy solutions at a company called Content Rules. She's based out of California and has 20 years in structured content. And like myself, basically we have similar arc here, 20 years in structured content and then specialized in life sciences for the last 10 years. Fun fact about Regina, she lives a dog spotting lifestyle, which is very cute. You should Google it. Okay, so without any further ado, here is Regina. So Regina, hello. Do you want to
Hello.
introduce hello? Do you want to introduce yourself to our Omnichannel X audience and tell them a little bit about yourself?
Yes, so I'm Regina, and I have been working in structured content for more than 20 years. Um, my goal is to help companies solve their complex content challenges. And often structured content is the way to solve many challenges with one fell swoop. Although, as you know, it is not an easy just, oh, we just install this software and everything's fixed. So
Oh,
I
but
have
please.
been specializing in life sciences for the last 10 or so years. I've worked in every industry, so I bring a lot of experience to the game.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I think we have very similar backgrounds actually. Similar amount of time, similar kind of mix of roles. Um, so I am interested to know, just up front, what do you think are the major factors for effective content management in the context of life sciences? So, I think a lot of our listeners are familiar with content management in general, but we're doing a big push for life sciences this year. What makes life sciences content management different, and what do really those kind of brands need to think about that they aren't, maybe other brands are, or that
Right.
they have to simply because they're life sciences?
Well, first off, I think the content management challenges are pretty much the same. Too much content, can't find content, don't have the right content. Um, it's locked in big documents. Nobody knows exactly. I shouldn't say nobody knows. It's hard to find exactly where the same information is appearing throughout the body of work. A lot of it's trapped in people's heads of where they
Mhm.
know it. So the challenges are very similar regardless of industry. I think for life sciences, one of the challenges is this industry has not embraced component based modular structured content as early as some other industries have. And so there's a bigger legacy of content to deal with, and less experience in the industry with this type of content, although that has been changing in recent years, as you have seen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been recent years have been great. I think that there's been lots of great projects starting up, but as you say, they're kind of starting from a disadvantage because
Yes.
they're just starting now. They're facing AI and headless and personalization and omnichannel and but they're kind of doing it all at once because they've been a little bit behind. I also found that there's can kind of be a challenge because there's often a need and a tradition of hiring. Well, just say with need to hire content creators who actually have a lot of subject matter expertise, meaning that you can be actually even quite senior running teams that are quite content heavy, but content is really not your background. Maybe you're a pharmacist, or maybe you're an MD, or maybe you're a nurse or somehow medically trained. You're finding that a lot in your projects as well?
Yes. definitely. And these um, people bring a ton of experience, not just the deep knowledge in their field, but a ton of experience with academic writing and scientific writing and journal articles and publishing and that kind of content, which is important. There's also the more enterprise content mindset that is a more, and when we talk about structured content here, we're talking a more componentized, standardized, modular way of thinking about the content.
I use the
And
term
that,
Lego-like.
yeah, exactly. The Lego bricks example. So that's a very different way of
Hmm.
thinking about content, thinking about it even before you're creating it, reviewing it, assembling it for delivery, etc.
Yeah.
So there's been maybe that's another thing about what makes it, what are some of the additional or unique to life sciences challenges to have, is helping people who've never been taught to write in that way, don't have experience in writing in that way, are absolutely able to adapt. It's just it hasn't been part of the culture for a long time.
Yeah.
So um, that is one of those things that I do find, though. I work with people who are very experienced and have been writing scientific communications for a long time, who really embrace, they're like, that's the way I think, or that's, oh, this makes it so much more efficient, or I see that I'm not having to create redundant content all the time. I can find what I need. So once you're kind of in the structured content mindset, a lot of people are really happy to be there.
Yeah, I think that once they grok the methodological side,
Yes.
they can definitely get down with the methodology, having a methodology and having a particular way of doing things. It's interesting because a lot of scientific writing that I see is actually the opposite of what you want. It's dense and there's a lot of convoluted sentences, not a lot of bullets. It's thick writing, and and have you also encountered this kind of culture of, well, I can't simplify it because for my professional audiences it will sound like I'm talking down to them.
Yes.
And what are your feelings on that?
That's not where I typically start in a project of helping people move towards more structure and adopt a more componentized um, feel for the content, because again, I think that fits a lot in that subject matter expertise and knowing the audience. So then we start asking some questions. If you also have to provide layperson versions of the same information, or
Hmm.
where do we need to standardize and say the same thing to everybody, and then add more detail for the experts, maybe less detail or a simpler way of explaining the detail to patients. And that's where the content would diverge a little bit and not
Yeah.
have that same one. So but yes, and there's a long tradition of writing in the order in which you do things. This is our study design, these were our people, this was our methodology, and then at the end there's the results and the conclusion. Well, a lot of times when the users or the audience is accessing this information, they just need the conclusion.
Hmm.
And you do have to back it all up. Obviously, you need all that information. But it's just starting to think of this in a upside down and inside out way for how we can deliver this content and make it more findable, more usable, and more just faster and more effective to achieve the purpose we want to achieve, which is to communicate information about the product.
Well, that's you raise a very interesting point, which is this kind of going back, building on what we were just saying about the building of new mental models. Like there hasn't
Yes.
been a lot of experience thinking about content this way, and so when you say something like, well, you can have a document that lives front to back when you wrote it, but it's presented back to front when you present it, or vice versa. Or you can simultaneously have uh, the one core thing and then extra detail for healthcare professionals, but simultaneously sometimes there's things you can just say to a healthcare professional, but you're going to have to lead up to it for a layperson, so that they are going to need actually more detail on the front end. But all of these things can happen at once if you have this Lego world where you can have different Lego bricks for different situations, and you can remove them and reorder them when it comes to present them out. That takes some mental rethinking, which can take a while.
Mhm. It does. It takes so it's like, okay, I'm thinking about content in a Lego building block kind of way. Now what do I do?
Hmm.
Well, in order to get a team to write the content consistently enough that you can take the different pieces of content and put them together in different ways to create different deliverables, or even just send one. We are moving in the submissions management side. You're moving to the health authorities are moving to
Hmm.
data driven submissions. So it won't
Excellent.
always be a full document. I'm sure we will have the full documents for all kinds of purposes, including archival, for some time. However, we are already in a world where we can submit data as it becomes available in smaller pieces. We're really thinking about this data as data and not so
Hmm.
much data that gets pasted into a document that gets delivered as a document. So
Amen.
we're there. Yeah. So one of the ways we look at this is go, how do we get the team to unify on writing the right information so it's in the right place at the right time?
Yeah.
And
What are your top techniques and tips for that?
yeah, so some of it is we have this at Content Rules, where I work, we have a framework, the 5 dimensions of content standardization.
Hmm.
And we look at content in all 5 of these dimensions, which are the output, your full deliverable. That's a clinical study report, that's a standard response letter, whatever the deliverable is. The components, which are the pieces of content, the building blocks that make up the deliverable. Um, and then within the components, you have paragraphs, you have sentences, and you have words. So we're really going from the biggest thing of all. Here's our entire dossier, or here's our entire, document,
Hmm.
down to these are the words we have standardized, which is terminology management. And when you standardize in all 5 of these dimensions, then you have a very rich body of content that all fits together the same way. If you get Lego or if you get a different brand of building block, all of the pieces fit together. They have standardized the connectors, they've standardized the widths and the depths and all of that. So of course the content within these building blocks of content are your intellectual property, they're your study results, they're your data. Um, but how you talk about it, what you include, even something like the voice and tone, which we don't often think about with scientific writing, but voice and tone is, like we were talking about, well, what's to the healthcare professional, what's to the patient. Anyway, so coming up with what are the standards for our content so that all the authors know what to write, when to write it, what terms to use, and you end up with a body of content that's so consistent that you can actually mix and match and deliver these personalized experiences um, based on the same
Personalized or channel specific
or
or
channel.
audience specific. I know that we sometimes say personalized as sort of shorthand, but there's so many reasons that you actually
Yes.
might give a different view. It could be for a whole, not for an individual person, but a whole type of persona, a whole audience, an entire region, particular channel, and then the particular roles and so on. But yes, exactly. Um, there's Can you walk us through an example? So where have you had like a project, and also in that, when you've had a successful project, I'm very interested in talking about how do you make these standards available? Like, there's always like, sure, they go on a training course, but how do you make the standards something that they can access at their time of need as they work? How do you keep, onboarding new people? Talking about the real life of a real project, a little bit
Yeah.
about how to make these things fly. Because the theory's great, and I'm totally down with theory, but it's the stories of how do we pull this off, I think, that make these conversations so interesting.
Yes. So, first off, it's typically kind of a big project. It's not something you're going to do in a couple of weeks
or,
um,
or months.
or months. Although you can have incremental gains along the way to keep people engaged and to see that benefit and not have to wait a whole year
Yeah.
before you see benefit. So typically, in developing standards, what I do when I come in, I'm a consultant, so I would come into a team, and we have a team of people who have a range of backgrounds and experience with content, with the product, with their particular area. And typically, these teams include, they might be medical writers, subject matter experts. Sometimes we have some folks from IT and engineering. So we're already thinking about the technology to enable what we need to do with the content. And we work through, as a team over a period of time, the basics of the content architecture. And so that means, what are the outputs we'll be delivering? What component types do we need? There's an example from, this is from the submission side, but there's an example very, very early on. You are developing your clinical study protocol for your clinical study. And in that, you have a schedule of assessments that says, what assessments are we going to perform and when? I know it's a lot more complicated than that, but for the shorthand of this conversation, that schedule of assessment traditionally has been copied and pasted between the protocol. Maybe it's even earlier than that in a protocol synopsis. It gets put into the clinical study report about that clinical study. It's in the investigator's brochure. It appears kind of in many places. And it has not historically been easy for a company, a life sciences company, to just create the schedule of assessments as one unit of information and then reference it in from a single source of truth wherever it's needed. So with my small team, we will work through, what are the deliverables? What are the components within those deliverables? How do we write them? What's a good architecture? With life sciences, we have certain regulatory requirements to meet in the output. But we all know there's actually a lot of fluidity in how each company and each team within a company creates the content to meet those standards. So we will start with best practices. We don't try to reinvent anything that's already working well for an industry, but there's always these unique things. So the small team works on the architecture, works on the other standards. If we're also doing terminology at the same time, we might even be talking about metadata. It depends on the size of the team and how ambitious we're being in phase one. After we know what the content is and needs to be, then ideally is when we start talking about technology. Do our current systems enable us to do what we want to do with our content? Typically not. If you're moving from a document-based to a structured content ecosystem, typically that's when you're looking at a structured content management system. At that point, of course, you're choosing what do we do for our proof of concept? What do we do for our pilot? What are we measuring? So how long do these important tasks take us today? What kind of improvement do we want to see? Did we see that? And then we bring different teams in phases, and we extend our structures, which I've been calling the content architecture. Oh, you guys deliver a whole different set of content. Well, let's see, do our current structures fit your content? This one does, this doesn't, that's unique. Let's build a structure. But at that point, you are incrementally adding on as you're bringing new teams in. So again, super high level. That methodology has worked in other industries. It works in life sciences. I mean, it's really just a good practice to keep a contained scope, focus on that most crucial part of what you need to structure and why. We're not structuring just a structure. We are trying to get more efficient, have full traceability of every change, make the content findable for us as authors and for our audience, make it usable once you find it, and enable all these ways of delivering it. Those are what we're trying to do. So we need to do it in an incremental and building block kind of way.
So yeah, that's that. So there's two things in there which I want to come back to is the measures. I'm interested to see if you or hear about what kind of metrics are you setting, and are those different than what the company was already doing, because I'm finding metrics are in a bit of a sad state when we started a lot of these projects.
Yeah.
And then also, you're doing this incremental build, as you say. It's not 1 week to another. Having the challenge of people kind of dropping off, and keeping their knowledge up throughout the project. But I think I'm sure our audience is excited about the numbers first.
Yeah. So the number one thing that you can do today, right now, as soon as you have finished listening to this podcast, is go honestly look at what are all the things people are doing and how long does it take to do them. From there, you can get what does it cost? I mean, cost and time and all of that. So I'm going to take one example. So one big advantage of going to a component-based structured content ecosystem is content reuse. And content reuse replaces redundancy. And I think, Noz, you or I mentioned before this idea of a single source of truth, which is wherever you need to provide information, say it the same way, simply reference that single source of truth and provide the information.
Mm-hmm.
You may have 5 different ways you have to provide the same information, and there's a justification for each of those 5 ways. So you have 5 single sources of truth, but they are not a copy, paste, and tweak, copy, paste, edit, copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. So what we look at today that often surprises teams, even though the authors, the reviewers, we all know people are copying and pasting and maybe tweaking a little bit here and there or rewriting. People are often surprised at how much redundant content gets created in this way because a lot of the changes are not actually necessary for that audience or that time. It's people falling into the words and kind of changing the words.
It's just because this variation for
Sure.
variation's sake.
And we haven't been writing as a team in a consistent, componentized way, following our 5 dimensions of standardization, following the standards we as a team have defined. So therefore, today, if you're copying and pasting some content from one document to another, it probably isn't going to fit smoothly.
Yeah.
So when we look at metrics and we're looking at, well, how much redundant content, how much time is spent, copy, paste, tweak, we think that's not a big deal until it's time that that content needs to be updated. And then authors are opening, checking out from SharePoint or Documentum, the big whole or some other tool, a big document, using Control F, trying to find, based on all the terminology they can think of that someone might have used, or it's in our own heads. I wrote that. I know where it is. I go in and I change mine, but that's not helping you change yours.
Yeah.
So as soon as you get in an update cycle, that's where you have risk that content will stay out of date because no one can find it to update it. And that's where you have a lot of time spent updating and finding and trying to get it all polished up. So if we go to structure and we say, but now we're reusing this piece of content everywhere we need to say this, we're reusing it in all these places. We only have to update it in that one place. The tools give us options about versioning and things like, we've made an update, but that legacy content isn't allowed to have the new update, so we won't let it update. Whereas this content needs to receive the update, so we'll let it update, and that all gets into the tooling and the plan. So with metrics, if you look at what is happening today, and you look at it honestly, and you know that it's a bigger number than anyone wants it to be, that's okay. You're meeting your deadlines. You're working as best you can in the tools and the processes you have.
Sorry, what's a bigger number?
It'll be a bigger number than you think. How much time is being spent finding?
The time being spent. Right.
Yeah. Which of course will have a cost associated with it. If it's all in different authoring tools, there's different licensing costs. I mean, that you can go as far as you want in developing these KPIs and developing what you're measuring. And then you need to look, down the line, there'll be an initial gain of, hey, we're not spending that much time on copy paste and finding anymore because we have our single source of truth and we know where it is and we can update it. And then down the line, that's going to just keep growing. At first you haven't gotten every piece of redundant content out of there and replaced it with a single source of truth. You can't. But over time, your reuse, the percentage of content you're reusing goes up, and therefore the cost of that content is coming down. So
There's a
reuse is
there's an
just one big
interesting
example.
there's a there's always a, and I'm interested to hear your experience of this. There's always a kind of a tense moment at the beginning of this where you've invested more than you're getting out, and like keeping everybody engaged and excited through that period where, especially because the as you're deduplicating this mass of content, um, there a lot of new stuff suddenly starts hitting the review process. And if you are reusing and you're able to create, personalized variations and all these outputs, people can get excited and start putting out all sorts of new stuff that they didn't have the time to do before. So now you're let's say you're faster, your error rates are going down, etc. But then there's this kind of rough patch where you go, okay, but the review team isn't able to keep on top of all this stuff we're putting it through them, or it takes a long time to actually look at 7 disparate examples and choose the best one, or reconcile the best one. How do you advise people to kind of shepherd their organization through that phase of the project?
Right. So there's a couple ways that can go. One is start with new and don't change the old.
Mm-hmm.
One is start with new content, and then the most important, the still living, often frequently updated existing content, um, you do go through and you dedupe maybe during its regular review cycle. And then um, the third, and this is a service actually my company Content Rules provides, which is, maybe the team is working on new content in the new way. We have a service we call content transformation, where we come in and we actually deduplicate and convert, and anything that needs to happen to that legacy content. And I'm saying legacy, I don't mean like it's old and archived. It's just the
Stuff that
existing.
already exists.
Um, and that is kind of a one-time investment, after which that content is valuable, and you can find it and you can update it and you can use it and you can publish it. So I think a lot of teams will start in the new way of thinking about content. They want to start with kind of their newest product. They're probably also, in that case, life sciences organizations are really looking at structure in many different areas
Mm-hmm.
right now. So you might find that your colleagues over there in clinical or over in CMC are also moving to structure, and you can talk to them and figure out, oh, okay, you know what, this product is what they have started their componentized journey on, so we're going to do it with that product as well. So again, it's kind of the initial investment of going from, we've worked in word processors for 40 years, to a componentized structured ecosystem. There's change management, there's new technology, there's new ways of thinking about the content, there's content architecture, there's a lot of streamlining that has to happen.
Yeah.
And meanwhile the health authorities are also going, hey, you got to give it to us in this new format, in this new way. And
So
each
it's
one,
yeah.
go ahead.
So it's basically it's great, but it's not instant and it's not trivial. It's
Right.
worth it. That's what
It's
we're
worth
trying to.
it.
It's worth it.
It's worth it. And you don't want it to be instant or trivial, because or instant, I should say, because people need time to learn how to do this and think about it in the new way.
Yeah.
It's very quick. And by very quick, I mean the first time you're working in the new system, thinking the new way, it feels very slow and you have to look things up and you're like, I forgot what we're doing here. And the second time, the second release, the second update, the teams have already got it. Especially the people who really are enthusiastic, which not everybody is, but are really
Mm.
enthusiastic about this new way. By the third time, you're taking for granted it's more efficient, and you can find the content, you can pull it together, and that's when you can start complaining because now your expectations are raised so high. You're like, well, why can't we do this? At which point it's time to start having fun.
Yeah.
It's not
There's
that the
actually
transition's not fun, but the transition from documents to structure is a foundation. And once that foundation is laid, you can do all kinds of things. You and I have talked a lot about the omni-channel delivery and the personalized, giving the person what they need when they need it. Um,
how they want it.
that comes on the other side of the transition.
So it makes me think of a quote. I know the listeners will kind of be getting bored of me quoting this project. It's just one of our favorites from Eli Lilly, where one of the writers said that I find it strange to think about going back to old ways. I think about how to build my content rather than how to write my content. They've internalized that building block methodology, and they're going back to thinking about copying and pasting and rewriting, going, why did we ever do it that way?
Yeah. I mean, you're still writing. I hate to tell you, writers, you don't actually get out of writing. You're still writing. You're writing the new, the the slants that you didn't get to write before. Maybe you guys have barely been keeping up with some of the regulations in Europe around providing lay summaries and lay versions of everything. Well,
Mhm.
you regain some capacity. It takes away, all your formatting and fighting to try to get your bullet list to nest correctly. All of that is taken care of by the system. So you are back to focusing on, really writing the valuable content, and it's kind of more visible, has more impact. It's a little bit scary.
That makes staff happier though, because it's
Yes.
it's you don't want to be copying and pasting and tweaking. Like that's not what anybody's job is about. Like people want to feel that everything they create is going to deliver maximum value. So it can actually be really good for staff morale to be going, okay, I'm not doing menial document and content management stuff. When I sit down to produce, it's going to be as productive as possible. I'm going to get kicked off the airways if I don't ask you about AI.
Oh, yes.
Now that we have AI, why do we need to teach all these methodologies and standards, and can't just AI magic it for us?
I think people have now used the freebie versions of AI enough to know, oh, no, it can't. So, or it isn't, um, the answer. So, one of the things we've been talking about internally here a lot about generative AI, and that's what I know, several life sciences companies are really looking at. Can we use generative AI? So it's going to um, ingest all of your content, and then it's going to be able to write at least first drafts for you. So when AI is writing first drafts for you, if it is writing long form content, beginning to end, um, you don't have all that ability to deliver it in a personalized way. You don't have any tracking. You don't have the traceability. You're not managing the content. It's just like you had a writer go and write something. With Gen AI right now, every time it writes something, it's writing it differently. So, you'd have to really train it on your standards. Basically, everything that we have to do to our content to train an AI system to make it effective at producing content that's useful for humans is all the same things that we do as humans. So, anyway, the AI also will tag everything internally that makes sense to AI, but it's not necessarily putting on human friendly metadata and organizing into taxonomies either. And I'm not saying that it can't or we won't get there. I'm just saying right
Mm-hmm.
now it's not, I don't want to use the mature, but it doesn't do a lot of the things right now that we think it does. It can generate draft content for us. Um, it's a lot of risk. I think people are really looking at the risk because it can only generate based on what it knows. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
using air quotes here. And what it knows is maybe all the content you have fed it from your past history. Well, how much bias, how much limitation in the past, in the legacy content, because we didn't have the technology that we have today, how many times were um, studies done that were too small or too not diverse enough or something like that? So
Mm,
I think we have to be really cognizant of what we train the AI to do and recognize that an AI is not a structured content management system. You're not going to get all those content management capabilities
yes.
of knowing where your content is and tracking and who reviewed it and when did they review it. And when the health authority comes back and says, hey, did you follow your standard operating procedure for this? You're going to have to be able to prove. And right
And
now,
if
that's not available.
and if you've just had the AI kind of churn it out and then you've put it back into the same paradigm, like you're just putting it into
Mhm.
big documents and you're managing it, you're putting it through Viva and signing it off, uh, then you haven't you've maybe created it faster, but you have not addressed any of the other things we've been talking about.
Yeah, you can't use it as much. Now, that said, I think, and I'm kind of geeky, but I think there's a lot of potential. I mean, AI does a couple of things really well. It can process enormous amounts of data and it can process it very quickly. And it can spit out something that a human can understand. And as long as it's accurate, I think there's a lot of potential for AI to help us out in a number of areas in life sciences. I don't think right now it's not meant to be tracking, oh, this content got all these reviews and it was approved and it was submitted to these 5 health authorities and all of that. Like it might take that information and know that after it happens, but it's not giving us everything that we need.
I think for me the big one is you cannot throw AI at these problems. You have to apply it carefully.
Mm,
And
well said.
I don't know if you said it or whether I was just thinking it while uh, inspired somewhat by what you were saying. I am a big proponent of the idea that the structure and AI can work very nicely together in the sense that if you're using all of this drafting and analyzing capability, that's fine, but you have to have a human in the loop putting the results where they need to go, or very carefully integrating your AI into your system so that when you say do a short version of this, it knows what that means and puts it where it's supposed to go, as opposed to just chucking it out into a browser and then you ending up having to manage it then as another output. Um,
Yeah, and it might be great at things like from all this, generate a lay summary of that, or even on the fly, somebody's coming in and we want to serve them the right information. And it's as long as it's accurate, it's trained well, it's not just taking garbage that we gave it and spitting out garbage. So I think we have a lot of opportunity with it. But that's why I keep saying a structured content ecosystem,
yes,
because a structured content management system is one piece. It's your repository and it's your tracking and it might be your publishing engine, but there's also maybe you have a terminology management, maybe you have a metadata management, a taxonomy or a knowledge graph, is working in there, and then
data
you've got this
layer.
AI piece too. So I didn't
Yeah,
want to just limit us to like, oh, we have our database of content.
yeah.
It's
And
part of it.
the metaphor I'm using, which I think actually I didn't even occur to me until now, works nicely in life sciences, is actually laying out your AI anatomy. Like you have your knowledge graph and your ontology, which we'll define those. We don't have time to define those, but basically you have your intelligence kind of mapped out in a structured way. Then you have something like a chat GPT, which is kind of your mouth where you can speak to people and they can speak back. Then you've got auto tagging and natural language processing. It's you kind of got the intellectual brain part of the AI. You've got social listening, to not consider like, okay, I'm going to buy ChatGPT and it can do everything. There are types of AIs and they have different roles and they plug into different parts of your stack to
Yeah.
create this overall body of interrelated AI organs to get really medical.
Yeah.
So I'm afraid we're out of time. I'm actually really enjoying this. I would love to run longer. If you just need to hear more from Regina, you can contact us and tell us you gotta have her back on the podcast because I am very sad to be cutting for time. But Regina, where can people get in touch? Are you a LinkedIn person or a
Yes,
Slack?
I'm on LinkedIn. Our website is contentrules.com. So
Okay.
you can always find me at contentrules.com. And I don't know. I'm on LinkedIn. You can just Google me. I'm everywhere.
All right, great. Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your having you here
Thank you.
today. And thank you all for listening. Give us a shout. Remember, this is part of our um, omni-channel for life sciences, pharma and life sciences series. There's lots of other sessions on the website. So if you can sign up, you can sign up for this one. Or you can listen, this one's obviously free. You don't have to sign up. But if you sign up for that, you get the whole library that goes with this one. And all the different sessions that go for this market that we're doing in this package. Thank you so much, Regina. I will hopefully see you on the podcast sometime in the future.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.